We're back for more.
We are back for more punishment today. Which sport has the world's greatest athletes? That's what we're going to talk about today.
There's only one answer.
Well, let's not get to your answer yet.
I think there's more than one answer.
There's only one correct answer.
Pretty heavily debated. This comes up quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I know everyone's sort of a bit more biased to their sport or something that they're interested in, which will probably come up today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Dhiren will probably think powerlifters are like the greatest athletes on the planet.
Well, they are, but
reality is they're like this close to like diabetes and I'm kidding.
whatever it takes
All
to
the
be strong.
powerlifters don't come at me,
Yeah,
all right?
players.
Or I'll pull your beards.
Yeah, it's a dangerous group to come after, isn't it? Powerlifters.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
They're a crazy bunch.
And of course Ross thinks that jiu-jitsu athletes are the greatest on the planet.
I actually don't.
Spent half the time
Definitely
on
not
that.
jiu-jitsu. But yeah, interesting topic, and I don't think it'll ever be solved.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there is. I think by the end of it, we'll probably get to some sort of consensus that we all sort of agree on.
Oh, I don't know about that.
No, you reckon?
The term GOAT gets thrown around a lot.
Yeah. Well, why don't what?
Gets thrown around for every sport, right? But
Right.
who's the GOAT of the GOATs?
Yeah. Well, why don't we start with what do you consider to be the definition of a great athlete? What?
Well, you got to take into consideration sort of cardiovascular fitness, strength, agility, skill, the
Mindset.
mental aspect, the focus, the mindset. So it's a culmination of all of those things, right? So obviously some sports require all of those elements and some sports don't require all those elements. So I think the sports that don't require all of those elements,
We can tick off straight away.
yeah, you can pretty much get rid of.
Golf, bowling.
Golf, bowling, although they're very difficult. Like golf is renowned as being one of the most difficult games.
Of skill.
Is
yeah.
it a game of skill? Golf?
I think so.
We're
It's all
not
technique.
talking about golf. We're not talking about golf.
Golf's a big sport.
A very popular sport. Would I say it has the world's best athletes? Not when guys like John Daly are able to compete at the highest level.
All right. What about is the best athlete born the best athlete, or are they do they become the best
That is an
athlete
entirely
to
different
training?
topic. That is an entirely different topic.
It is, but it's a really interesting question. I think they're born with some of the elements that we just discussed, and then some are attained and trained.
Yeah.
What do you reckon?
Yeah. No. I tend to agree.
Yeah, you can't be the world's best athlete with shitty genetics.
Yeah.
You got to be born with some gifts, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
And really aggressive, forceful parents that push you down
Yeah.
a sport from the age of 1.
I don't know, but a lot of athletes aren't born with skills. Those are a lot of skills come
Nature
from
versus
training.
nurture.
Yeah. So.
Yeah,
Okay.
true.
Okay, so straight off the bat, what do you guys think is the sport that requires, the highest level of athleticism?
If you take into all those factors that we just discussed, I am going to say I'm going to narrow it down to 2 sports.
Okay.
I think mixed martial arts and the NFL.
NFL.
Yeah,
Okay.
American football. I think they have the greatest athletes.
I would also argue that they have some of the worst. If you look at the NFL and you look at a bunch of the players who are literally just, punching bags, who are just there to block players, they have a high ceiling for sure, but I think they have a very low floor.
Think of what it takes just to get to that, to be a punching bag though. Like just to be able to play on a team and to get the opportunity to be that punching bag that you're describing, there's 20 years of football. They're living, they're breathing it. No one walks onto a football team, NFL. Like they have probably the most stringent testing processes just to be able to play at that high level.
Okay. What do you think, Dhiren?
And that's what I think goes against mixed martial arts. You'll see a guy that's had 3 or 4 amateur fights, turns pro, and then within 5 fights, if he's got potential, you might even see him in the UFC.
Yeah.
So there's not as much sort of lead up. Like they're not having to do as much from a young age to be able to do it at the high level. You can pick that up later in life and fairly quickly. But the reason why I say NFL as well, like you see some NFL athletes, after they retire or halfway through their career, they decide to change sports and they actually are high level at that other sport as well. You've seen a few NFL guys come across to the UFC. They haven't won championships or whatever, but guys like Matt Mitrione and Brendan Shaw.
I'd argue that rugby and rugby league have better athletes than the NFL.
Really?
Yeah, well, there's plenty of guys that came from rugby league that made it in the MMA as well.
There's plenty of guys come from rugby league that have gone to the NFL, or there's a few.
Yeah, in the later stages of their career.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, I would say rugby league athletes are high-level athletes, and especially how the game is played now.
Yeah.
It's a lot faster. It's a lot more free-flowing. They're much fitter, stronger, leaner. Like, I think all sports are obviously evolving, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
What do you think, Dhiren?
Well, you're probably going to like my answer, Hal, but I'd probably say just because, it's the biggest pool of athletes, soccer and basketball, right? Like, to get to the top, you're competing against more athletes than any other sports, right? Basketball, you have to be, a giant. But, soccer, you have to be quick. You have to be agile. You have to be, on top of your game.
Do you have to be strong in soccer?
You have to be, right?
Certainly more core strength than upper body.
If you're weak, you'll never make it in soccer, right? Like, it's a different kind of
Most
strength.
of these guys are 50, 60 kilos, though. They're not strong men.
I don't know if you've seen Adama Traore, but
No, they're not. Yeah. They're probably not that light either.
Yeah.
But they're small guys.
Yeah, but
they definitely it's agility, and it's cardiovascular fitness. They are
the balance of skill, cardio, and strength. I think football, soccer, it's right up there. But basketball as well. Like, you're competing against so many people to get to the top, and if you, I just read this thing about Jermaine O'Neal. He got kicked out of the Heat, or he left the Heat because they said he can't eat Oreos.
I saw that. That was very funny. They had like a body fat requirement.
Yeah. Oh, right.
And he was saying I'm like 35, 36. I can't be doing this.
But yeah, so that's what I think for team sports anyway. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if you have a disagreement with somebody, you tend to resolve it with your fists. So mixed martial arts is, for me, the number one as well.
Yeah, and the reason why
Hunger Games, Dhiren.
Yeah, but the reason why I say mixed martial arts, it's because it's an individual sport as well. It's not a team sport. So you can be the greatest athlete in the world and have 10 other team members that are rubbish, you're still going to lose.
Yeah.
Like, one player can't influence a result. And you can have on and off games, right? Like, LeBron James, he's not always on. You know what I mean? In fighting, you have to be on. Otherwise, there's dire consequences. So if you look at all of those factors we talked about, right? Yeah. Cardiovascular fitness. Try boxing for a 3-minute round.
Very hard.
Versus go play basketball for 3 minutes. You tell me which one leaves you more exhausted.
It's not about that.
That's one. That's one factor. Strength. Okay, you need to be strong.
You need to be fast. You need to be
fast, strong, agile, and mentally on.
Yeah. It's very hard to compare individual sports and team sports. Individual sports, you're kind of, you're out there for everybody to compare against. It's an easy comparison. Whereas with team sports, you might be the best athlete in the worst teams, and you might not get that same, credentials or plaudits.
We probably all agree, like rugby league, NFL, basketball, mixed martial arts.
Soccer, basketball, so every sport is.
But if you look like outside of those, I think there's a gap.
If I'm picking two, I'm picking AFL and basketball. After playing a couple seasons of AFL, the level of fitness required is nuts because it's just constant running for a prolonged period of time. Basketball is the same.
But you could argue anyone, once they're fit enough, can run for prolonged periods of time.
But then it's physical as well, and it's the skill.
Yeah.
But comparatively to other sports, AFL, because it's quite domestic, it's coming from a smaller pool, right? So
that's a good point, which is why I'm backing up basketball. If you take it all into consideration, if you think skill, mindset, strength, endurance, and speed as well, which I guess are two parts of cardiovascular. Think about an NBA player, for example, it's a very physical game. They are sprinting essentially for on and off for up to 2.5 hours.
2.5 hours, 38 minutes.
So
like most of them don't play more than 40 minutes per game.
it doesn't matter. I think the fact that they're sprinting makes such a big difference.
Yeah. Well,
on top of the fact
think
they're
about
playing,
soccer. You're sprinting for 90 minutes without a break.
NBA,
with
you're
one break.
playing 82 games in the regular season.
Yeah, it's a long season,
It's
right?
incredibly long. I genuinely don't think you will find a better athlete outside of the NBA. All things considered, the distance and the amount they run and the speed on top of, and skill is another thing.
But can they fight?
No.
But I agree with you.
Yeah, I agree too.
Like,
It's and they are renowned as some of the best athletes in the world. And if you took some of those athletes at a young age and put them in another sport, there's a good chance they're going to excel.
Yep.
yeah, and I think one measure of judging who the best athlete is how these dominant athletes impose their will on others in the sport, right? MMA is quite clear. If you're on a winning streak, you're imposing your skill and your will on somebody. Basketball is quite clear as well. You've got guys like LeBron, like when they're on the court, they're a dominant force. Soccer as well. Ronaldo at his peak, he's imposing his will on 11 other guys, right? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys remember. You guys probably a bit younger, but it was on TV a few years ago. They did like Australia's greatest athlete. It was like a series of different sort of sporting, not events, like just skill drills, certain things, right, that they had to complete. So they got all Australian athletes, famous Australian athletes that have played at the top level, and they pinned them against
Were they
each
in their
other.
prime at the time, or was this like?
No, they're in their prime. I think it was like Australia's greatest athlete or something. I don't know exactly what it was called, but yeah, they took athletes from each sport and they all had to compete against each other in different sort of sporting-based events. I think Billy Slater won it like 3 years in a row.
Oh, really?
So that sort of backs up your argument around NRL athletes. And Billy Slater, freak, right? Awesome rugby league player. But I think there's sports where there is a mix of, because I think what cinched it for him, he had great sort of cardiovascular fitness, but he was also very strong compared to a lot of the other, and fast. A lot of the other athletes, like AFL guys, fell down in the strength component.
Interesting.
They weren't able to. I think it was a simple bench press test.
Yeah.
And they were like bottom of the.
If you can't bench, you're not an athlete. No,
One thing I will say, and this isn't to discredit rugby players at all, but I don't think there's the same level of skill in rugby as there is, maybe not so AFL, but soccer and basketball in particular have incredibly reliant on skill.
Yeah. I mean, rugby is definitely rugby and league are both, very high skill sports. But when you're getting to the level of soccer and basketball, there's some,
Well, what's the skill involved in basketball?
What do you mean?
We got to get a ball through a hoop.
Oh, for fuck's sake. I'm trying to get under my skin.
Okay, let's use basketball versus MMA. MMA athlete has to be skilled.
Yeah, you're right.
In boxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, karate, taekwondo. Like, there's
I think
in
multi-
basketball, you have to be, skilled in dribbling and passing and shooting and defending.
Well, no, depending on your position.
No,
in the modern game, you have
no longer
to.
the case.
In the modern game, just like modern MMA, you have to be skilled across the board. Yeah,
I think they're comparable. I would,
Yeah.
if we're
Comparable in skills.
if you're asking,
You have to be a black belt in multiple different. Like, are you telling me LeBron James is a black belt in dribbling?
yes,
No. When you compare some of the guys that are like, he's not a black belt. He's probably
in dribbling and passing. Like LeBron's well-rounded. Bad example.
yeah,
but he is probably one of the most well-rounded. But is he a black belt in dribbling? Is he a black belt in all the skills in basketball?
You haven't seen some of the skills.
Yeah,
I think his size and athleticism makes up a lot for what he lacks in skills.
No. LeBron.
I think that a lot of
LeBron got
basketballers.
I think lack is a wrong word. I think
Well,
you could
it
definitely
is.
pick out.
I think that
players
there are
that are
better,
stronger in terms of shooting and dribbling. Like there always will be.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's his base athleticism that is his.
I mean,
greatest
he's no
strength.
Jordan, but he's good.
he's fucking smart too.
Yeah.
His IQ. If we're talking
Yeah,
just about LeBron,
But that's where you got to weigh up, right? Like how much. Like he's probably one of the greatest athletes in basketball, not one of the most skilled ever in basketball, right? But when you combine the two, that's when guys like that become the greatest.
Yeah.
So he's got enough skill but super high level athleticism that propels him to that. Whereas if you had all the skill in the world, but not much athleticism, it's not going to translate as well. So athleticism, I think,
Well,
trumps skill. You can
Yeah.
learn skill. You can't always learn athleticism. I think that's more genetic.
Well, here's a wildcard option for best athlete, pushing it to the limit of human, skill, performance.
If you say powerlifting,
No.
Formula One, right? Your reaction time.
They're just sitting there. What are you talking about?
I
Nah.
don't believe that.
No, I don't believe that.
Formula One is on another level, right? Like
If you talk about mental,
going
Physical.
as fast as you can. The fear of crashing, like it's some elite athletes in that spot,
100%.
and they don't have a long shelf life,
No, they're all very young guys, and sort of they hit their mid to late 20s, and that's when they start to sort of teeter off. But yeah, it's an underestimated sport. Those guys, how long's a race?
like 40 laps,
But
like an hour and a half. Yeah,
you make one tiny error, you're dead.
yeah,
Like, so the consequences are probably even greater than mixed martial arts.
yeah.
At least mixed martial arts, you've got a referee there to sort of stop or
Yeah.
save you.
More people have died playing squash than mixed martial arts, like.
That's from heart attacks from all the old fat guys.
But yeah, definitely Formula One. Like it's a high stakes game, and
I think those guys are underestimated as athletes because they're sort of sitting there behind a powered vehicle. You sort of tend to discredit them, but yeah, the amount of training, and those guys are on point with their nutrition because they have to be at a certain weight, with their training because they need to be physically fit. They're wrestling a car for 40 laps.
they lose, a couple kilos of fluid every race. Like,
Yeah.
it's pretty intense on the body.
And mentally, I don't think, like, those guys are rock stars. So mentally, to do all they do leading into a race and then have to switch on.
yeah,
That was a good one.
yeah, and
I don't think sort of, like, if you look at strength and agility and
Yeah.
conditioning is definitely there with them, but it's a different type of conditioning.
Yeah.
yeah, probably strength has a little to do with it.
What about like the stringent testing of like the NFL to get in, all those combines and the amount of like,
NBA combines
are they pretty intense as well?
And again, NFL.
Don't you just have to do like a vertical leap and touch a couple of
Fuck
pegs
no.
and you're in?
But NFL is also
kidding.
limited to one country, right?
Yeah, true.
Essentially, it's not a world game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, true. And yeah, so maybe basketball sort of trumps NFL because of that. There's a bigger pool.
Yeah.
Multiple countries across the world. It's harder to make it to
I
that
think
high level.
There's a higher floor as well, considering I think the least fit people you'll find in the NBA compared to the NFL, I think they'll run circles around each other.
The old NFL punter with a cig,
Yeah, there's no Maurice Spates or Kendrick Perkins in the NBA anymore. It's an athletic man's game.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah.
So you guys are going NBA. You reckon NBA?
Basketball. Yes.
And AFL?
Yeah.
Very.
Yeah.
They because I'm not an AFL guy, it's hard. Like, I do like AFL, but it's not my sort of chosen sport to follow. Anyone you talk to that's right into AFL or follows it, they're all backing AFL as like one of the most athletic.
I think
yeah.
in terms it requires greater fitness than rugby league or rugby union, but rugby requires greater strength.
Yeah. You're playing against bigger,
Good assessment.
stronger guys. It's more physical in rugby league, but yeah, the cardiovascular fitness needed to run on that giant oval, and those guys are covering 15, 20 Ks a game or something, isn't it?
Yeah.
Something.
At full speed.
Yeah.
Where does track and field fall into this picture? Is Usain Bolt the greatest athlete of all time because he can run the fastest? He's the best at his sport that there's ever been, and you can't argue with it because it's on the clock.
He's big, he's strong, he's fast. Is he agile?
Well, he
Is he-
couldn't
is he
really
skilled?
play soccer when he tried.
Is he skilled?
He's running in a straight line.
Yeah.
Sprinting is a skill. Sprinting is a skill.
I love how we downplay all the skills on
I know, as if we could
Just
do
move your
anything.
feet faster.
Yeah.
sprinting. There is so much technical detail
Oh,
to being
100%,
to being a
100%.
sprinter.
But
But I don't think they're not having to memorize plays. They're not having to constantly be in position. They're not having to assess what the opposition's doing. They're
At the
not.
end of the day, it's one thing you need to do.
Yeah, that's it. They can focus. They don't need to worry about anyone else. There's no other outside factors.
Well,
so I think that's where team sports do have that sort of advantage over individual sports as well, because you are having to assess the opposition. You are having to run your own plays. You're seeing what your own teammates are doing. There's a lot going on.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
So the answer, Unresolved.
Men's decathlon.
Stay tuned to part 2 where we'll actually figure it out.
Yeah, actually, we should do a part 2 and actually agree on one sport. But what are we down to? Basketball,
soccer,
and MMA.
Yeah.
Rugby?
And rugby.
Yeah.
Rugby league.
Yeah.
Or in rugby union.
We'll do some fact checking and come back.
Yeah.
It's not a bad one.
Yeah.
But I'm interested to know everyone else's thoughts on this.
But at the end of the day, if they're all going to fight each other, MMA is going to...
Yeah, when you see the clips come up on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, make sure you leave your comments on what sport you think has the greatest athletes in the world. I'd be so keen to sort of figure out what everyone else thinks.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Cool.
Who is the greatest athlete of all time?
Oh, that's another topic for debate.
Yeah, maybe that's the second part of this episode is the specific athlete.
Part 1 in the books. Stay tuned for part 2 next podcast.
And part 3, the one after that.
Let's go.
Musashi out.
Musashi out.